slide, you'll see a link to a video. Because of some tech issues, I'm just going to have that link here, and they're going to send that presentation out to you. So you'll have the opportunity to listen to a story about Donna and Ricardo. Melody has met both of them. How do you know them, Mel?
I'm listening to the National Society Community. They're both really good people. I mean, they're smart, and they got a family. They want to get married. They both was living in the institution, and their people said no, but they proved it wrong. They got married. They had a son, and they got a couple grandkids, and they really look happy.
Yeah, so this is just a video of them sharing their story from actually both living in institutions to then moving out of those institutions, getting married, having a family, kind of facing back, not necessarily backlash, but people who didn't think that was necessarily a great idea or didn't think that they were able to do those things. So just kind of a great example of what we're going to talk a little bit about today, and just that how we can support people to really have full lives with family and relationships and meaningful roles that that they can fulfill. I just wanted to start off by just talking about kind of our objectives for the presentation today. So we want to discuss an individual with disabilities' right to relationships, sexuality, marriage, and parenting. Some of the barriers that they often face when wanting to accomplish these things, wanting to have these things in their lives, misconceptions that often keep them from reaching these types of goals, and then how you as case managers or just in general family members can support people and family members who might be uneasy about talking about these topics to kind of navigate through this. And then also some tools specifically supported decision making and the life course framework tools that can really be used to kind of provide an outline and help families and individuals identify the supports to really help them along some of these journeys.
The arc of the United States Christian statement. Every person has the right to extend choices regarding sexual, expression, and social relationship. The presence of an individual with disability regarding sexual does not just loss of rights desire to sexual.
So basically, we're covering the ARC of the United States has released a position statement, and we really feel in agreement with what they say about these topics. And so we are gonna, the next couple slides, we'll be going through their position statement. But as Mel just read, basically the basic premise is that people have the right to be a part of sexual relationships, social relationships, romantic relationships, and that just because they have a disability does not justify that they should lose those rights necessarily to have those meaningful experiences. So within that position statement, it says that all people have the right within relationships to develop friendships and emotional and sexual relationships where they can love and be loved and begin and end relationships as they choose. I mean, that's honestly what we all want, right? We want to be able to love and be loved, and people with disabilities have that same right as we all do. Also, they have the right to dignity and respect, to be treated with respect in those relationships. The right to privacy, having your own space, which, as you all probably know, can be hard in the world where there's always staff, and but having privacy, confidentiality, and being able to choose who you spend your time with. Also, that with respect to sexuality, individuals have the right to sexual expression and education. that is reflective of their religious, moral values, that they get individualized education information so that they can make informed choices about things like reproduction, marriage, family life, safe sexual practices, sexual orientation, sexually transmitted diseases. You know, most of us received some type of sex education when we went through high school. Oftentimes people with disabilities they either don't receive the same curriculum or they don't receive it at all. And so it's important that they're learning about relationships, they're learning about sexuality, so that they can make informed choices. And we'll talk a little bit more about how the ability to make choices actually helps people make better choices. And also that, again, as all of us are, we should be protected from sexual harassment, physical, sexual, and emotional abuse. And again, we'll talk about how, having knowledge and having education actually helps protect us from those things. And then with respect to the potential for having and raising children, individuals with disabilities have the right to, again, education and information about how to do that, how to raise children. That is individualized. And when I say individualized, accessible too. Make sure that it's in a way, in a format that is understandable for individuals, that is reflect each person's unique ability to understand. So not everyone is, going to learn from a textbook. Not everyone is going to learn from a visual presentation, but making sure that we're getting information that is accessible to people of all abilities and all levels of understanding, so they can make choices. They also have the right to make their own decisions related to having and raising children with supports, make their own decisions related to using birth control methods and family planning in the context of their personal or religious beliefs, have control over their own bodies, and be protected from sterilization solely because of their disability. And we know that historically that has been something that has happened frequently. People with disabilities were forced to be sterilized. And sometimes, it wasn't necessarily something that was outwardly harmful or meant to be harmful, but, families just not knowing any better and encouraging individuals to, to have surgeries and things like that to protect them. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that too as Melody shares her story. So now we're going to talk a little bit about barriers to the rights of people having these full fulfilling relationships. And so Mel's going to share some of what these barriers are oftentimes.
They need to decide to protect formally on a providers,
focusing on providers
the supports we think we are necessary. Don't listen without listening to the people trying to help. Makes them people with disabilities are children and not sexual touching.
So yeah, we're going to kind of discuss some of these as we go forward, but there's a lot of, barriers that, and oftentimes they're well-intentioned, but the desire to protect someone from harm and abuse. And then, not listening to what people want or thinking that we know better. And then one of the biggest barriers is that oftentimes people with disabilities aren't treated like adults who want and need those same relationships that we all do. So one of the things that we wanted to talk about when we're talking about people making decisions, whether it's about small things, about, what you do on a day-to-day basis or where you live, but also when it comes to relationships and marriage and parenting, there is something about being human is that we all get to make choices. And those choices sometimes are good, sometimes they're bad. I'm sure we can all think about a time in our lives when we've made poor choices, and that we've learned from those poor choices. And also times when we made good choices and we've been rewarded for those good choices. And that's part of learning, what is right, what is wrong, what we want and what we need is kind of learning from the ability to take risks and try. That's how we all learn. We all, from a kid who accidentally touches a hot stove and learns that he's not supposed to do that again. We all learn from bad decisions. And so it's important to let people with disabilities try and try again, but be there to help us make those decisions. Be there to help us understand the consequences of their decisions, but still allowing them to make the decisions that they choose to make. It's not a problem to say, if you do this, this might happen. But saying, if you do this, this might happen, so you can't do it, takes away really that person's dignity of risk, the dignity of trying and maybe failing. And so we also want to stress the importance of being proactive about that, and we'll talk a lot about that as we go forward. But the idea of using supports like supported decision making so that we can identify people ahead of time to kind of support a person in making those big decisions, so that they don't have to try and then we put in the supports, but we have those supports in place so that that an individual can go to before they maybe make a bad decision.
I like to fall. Everybody makes mistakes, big and small. People without disabilities get second chances. People with disabilities often don't. If we don't do it perfect the first time, we often get another chance, opportunity to again, constantly reminding the time we messed up.
And really that is, again, it's ultimately dehumanizing and humiliating, because every other human gets the chance to fail. And if we're not allowing people with disabilities to that same chance, we're taking away a vital part of the human experience. And I'm sure you all could probably think of individuals who have had things like that. One time they maybe went out and spent too much of their money, and so from then on, every time they go out, staff has to hold their money for them. And honestly, that's not going to make them learn about how to manage their money. It's just going to keep them from making the decisions about their money. But there's we when people with disabilities mess up, we tend to put it in a plan so they don't do it again. But sometimes people need to make those mistakes, and with respect to, of course, we do want to make sure that people aren't being unnecessarily risky or taking unnecessary risks. But again, we can do that by supporting them ahead of time and providing them with information and support. And also part of this is really understanding the importance of self-advocacy, of self-determination, of being able to make choices. So not only should we be able to try and fail, but in general, being able to make choices actually helps people make better choices. And understanding, and this is something with when talking to families, explaining that restriction doesn't always equal protection. Just because you're keeping someone from doing something doesn't mean it's going to protect them from any kind of harm or abuse. In fact, sometimes we see that the opposite is actually true. And so I think studies show that actually empowering people to have more choice and more power over their choices actually improves life outcomes, actually reduces the risk of abuse and exploitation, and actually makes people live longer. People live longer when they have greater levels of self-determination and the ability to make their own decisions. And so it's really important that we encourage that ability in people, so that they can really, so they do have those better life outcomes. We hear oftentimes, well, if they need a guardianship because they will get this or this will happen. But again, a guardianship doesn't always protect from that actually happening. It just puts a legal safety in place. But it doesn't necessarily protect bad things from happening to people. Allowing someone to make choices about small things in their life, what they eat, where they go, where they spend their day, teaches them how to process the bigger decisions like marriage, like relationships, like parenting, safe sexual practices. Those things are all a part of greater ability of self-determination. We also just want to talk about the importance of relationships in people's lives. And this could be a friendship, but it could be a romantic relationship, a marriage between a spouse. And I'm sure Melody can attest to this. Relationships, and we all can attest to this, relationships make our life better. They make our life stronger. They often make us feel secure, more confident. We have better abilities to make decisions because we have someone who's supporting us. They provide natural supports. Mel, do you want to talk about how Joe and you kind of support each other?
Yeah, I'm married and we'll be celebrating our 14th year next month. But with Joe and I, we have a really good bond. We both support each other in the things that we do and in the decisions that we make. And we just don't say, I support you. We sit down and we talk about them and we discuss them like little couples and little people supposed to. And that has really made our marriage stronger. I mean, with a lot of things that we went through, a lot of things that, we didn't tell no one, but now we're able to sit down and share our marriage and share, everything.
And Mel can attest that that has changed throughout time, but for a while Joe was one of Mel's primary supporters. She didn't get other services, other waiver services, because Joe was really her natural support system. Mm-hmm. He helped her with taking her to work and doing a lot. And then as Joe got older and it has had some health issues, that's had to change a little bit. But now Mel kind of supports Joe a little bit more than vice versa. And so, we all know that those people in our lives, whether it's a spouse or a friendship, they are essential to supporting our quality of life and naturally supporting us. And that's the same way for people with disabilities. So again, we know that social relationships, strong social relationships, and the number of social relationships we have affect our mental health, our behavior, our physical health, and again, our life expectancy. Adults who are more socially connected, who have relationships, who have important, meaningful relationships, reciprocal relationships, are healthier. They live longer than people who are more isolated, and they have more. They actually helps them make more decisions and have more personal control, because again, it adds that confidence and that ability. And that we know people who have valued roles. So the role of a spouse, the role of a parent, the role of a partner or a friend are less at risk of abuse and neglect, are more likely to experience good outcomes. Again, you have that safety net of people who are watching out for you and protecting you from things. So again, we just need to understand that people with disabilities should have that same opportunity to try on those roles, those relationship roles, whether it's being, dating or being in a committed relationship or getting married or having kids. We need to allow that experience. So now we're going to talk a little bit about some of the myths that people often think about when they think about people with disabilities, and why that they can't really participate in some of in marriage or sexuality or sexual relationships and things like that.
Myths. People with disability aren't sexual. True. People with disability are human and have the same physical emotions and sexual desires. Myth. People with disabilities can't understand romance, love, commitment. Two, people with disabilities can understand and design a relationship in a way that works for them.
And so that means it doesn't always have to be what we typically think of a relationship. You know, some people might want to be in a romantic relationship, but they don't want to be in a sexual relationship, and that's okay. It might not always fit what our society views as a traditional relationship. And it might, you know, but you know, understand that relationships can look and should be in a way that people are comfortable in what they want out of a relationship.
Mitch, people with disability are childlike. Two, people with disabilities grow up and experience sexual and romantic delight like everyone else.
So one of the things that we often hear is like, which I don't particularly like this you know, this language, but oh, they have, you know, the mind of a 10-year-old or whatever. But even though they might have some cognitive disabilities, their body is, their hormones are still that of a 30-year-old or a 20, you know, of an adult. And so forgetting that or refusing to accept that actually can put people in more harm, because then they might not know the appropriate ways to feel those feelings or to act on those feelings. It can actually lead to legal issues, criminal issues, or just in general, a lack of understanding or social awareness. And so, you know, refusing to think of people as the adults that they are doesn't really help them at all.
I know even with me, people told me when I was growing up that having a child, and I don't know no other woman in the world that didn't want to have that child and have that family, but I was told that you can't have this child will be taken from you, you can't take care of it. And for the life of me, I believe that. But like I also say to Amanda sometimes, back in that time, I was not a strong advocacy. So I let people talk me into doing things that I know were wrong. But then as I got older and got married and thought about, now I wish I would have listened to my own self. And I would be able to have my own family and husband.
Yeah. So, wanted to just share this graphic from a well, it's actually from a curriculum that we are utilizing in Self Advocates of Indiana, and was created by a self-advocate group out of Vermont called Green Mountain Self-Advocates. And they just did this infographic about what sexual self-advocacy means and how we can kind of instill that in people, helping them understand what their choices are related to not just sexuality, but also relationships and marriage and parenting. But what, you know, how they can kind of learn to advocate or for what they want and what they need. I'm not going to read through all of it, but I thought it was a really good handout. Now I will go through the next page, because the other side of it is what the people with disabilities, what self-advocates wanted people without disabilities, their family members, their support staff, what they wanted them to know about, you know, their rights for their future, their rights to family and to sexuality and to relationships. And that is that they want people, community, parents, and staff to let go of the idea that people with disabilities are not sexual and do not want to be in a relationship. As Melody said, you know, this just isn't true. You know, she had those same wants to get married, same desires to have a family as anyone else. Also, it's important for us to get information from other people, not just our support staff, but maybe from friends and community members. Make sure that people have access to, whether they use Planned Parenthood as an example here, but some type of community health care, medical care, so that they can get information about being in relationships, being sexually active, things like that. Again, the more people know, the less likely they are to engage in that risky behavior that we do want people to avoid. And then there's a fine line between getting support when needed and people taking over and making these decisions about you about your life. And so just things to keep in mind as you're helping support self-advocates and their families to navigate all of this. So Mel's going to talk a little bit more about her story growing up and just how she's kind of had to advocate and learn how to advocate over the years for the things that she wanted. So beginning with kind of her, teenage years. So Mel, do you want to share?
Sure. Growing up, I didn't really know what I had for a person because I live with my grandma and she's like old school, so she protected me. She kept me with her. I missed out on a whole lot. I missed out on like the kids would go to the football games on Friday nights and go to the dances after the game. Those kind of things I didn't get to do. I had a lot of those friends, but I couldn't hang out with them. On Friday nights, I was at home watching TV and doing things and being in places, at home. I missed out on my senior prom and my junior prom. I was ready to graduate, but the night after graduation, I had to go home where everybody else was going, out to a party. So when I came here in 1990, I realized there's a whole lot of things that I didn't know and didn't really understand even at that. But my aunt, she kind of took me, kind of picked up where my grandmother left off at. My aunt wasn't that strict. She was okay, Mel. You can do things and you can really have your life, but you be careful. But like I said, sometimes I think down home I was not sexual active at all. And my aunt was like afraid, oh my God, this child on way from Georgia, and she may get pregnant. What's gonna happen? What is the family back home gonna say that you brought this child here and she got pregnant? So I remember my first doctor's appointment here. And the doctor that I had, she's a real nice lady, but she asked the same question. She said, "Are you sexual active?" And I said, "My head, no." And she told me, she said, if you ever decide to get sexual, come back to me. And that's one of the things that my aunt heard. And my aunt did not let me ever forget that before I would do anything with anyone. I went back to my doctor. The doctor put me on the pill. I was on the pill and it was okay. But then eventually they were thinking that the pill may not work. So my aunt said, no, we don't need to do this. I mean, you're still young. And I'm thinking, okay. And she said, well, they kept saying, well, Melanie, you can't raise no child. And everything I heard that if you bring a child into the world, nobody's going to be here to take care of it. So the state will take care of it. And I'm like, oh no, I can imagine that. So what I did, like I said, unbeknownst to me, I went on and had my Tuesday moon. So there was no idea of having a child, and I didn't have no money to help me adopt. So later on down the line, I met Joe, and Joe and I were real close. And Joe didn't, neither one of us had any kids, but we both had a loving heart and a loving, we supported each other. And now couple of years back, we used to sit down before Joe got sick and thought about, oh man, why didn't we want go on and have this child? And I'm like, now that I wish I had. But even though not with the children, I am a very happy person. I truly am. I love Joe. He loves me. I mean, I've been here with a man that did my dog for a while. I really do love it. I travel, I enjoy life. So, I mean, there is a lot of good things that brought me from Georgia to here. And I can't imagine not having that support now. You know, yeah.
What do you think would have been helpful for your family? So you mentioned your family was just really concerned about you being sexually active and were afraid you were going to get pregnant. And so kind of isolated you, kept you away from those social situations. what do you think would have helped them to better understand?
I think maybe if someone could have talked to them and said that, okay, this is the way to go. This is what Melanie needs to do. To sit down and maybe be able to educate, because like I said, there was no, there's some special education classes, there was nothing. So no one told them. And like I said, they just said, okay, Melanie's not going to child into the world. And that was it.
So someone that could have explained your options and explained how to educate you on those issues to put them at ease.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So do you feel like you were maybe pressured by your family to get, surgery, the tube tie surgery?
Yep, I do.
Because they just didn't know. They were afraid of what would happen if you didn't.
Yeah.
And then, Mel, do you want to talk a little bit about when you met Joe and wanted to get married, some of the pushback that you guys got?
Mm-hmm. Like I said, Joe and I'll be coming up on 14 years in next month. But when we got married, Joe had worked at the library. And a lot of people Joe had took me around some of these people at his job and said, this is Melanie, we're going to, she's my friend, and eventually we're going to get married. And I think the day of that Joe proposed to me last night, Joe went into the library this morning and he introduced, said that I just asked Melanie last night to marry me. And one of the ladies that was there with him said, what did she say? And he said, Mel said yes, we got married. And the lady asked him, he said, are you sure you want to marry Melanie? Melanie Technicare, Melanie's disabled. And he said he stopped to hear the thing. He said, wait a minute. He said, why are you talking about Mel like that? He said, you don't know Mel. You don't know Melanie's heart. Melanie got a good heart. She got a good mind. And now we take care of each other. He just don't take care of me. I don't take care of him. We take care of each other. And I think if a lot of people will look at that, that's how you have a really good marriage. You take care of each other. We support each other. And things that I want to do, things that I need to do. He's right there, and the same with him.
Yeah. So I just think that's a great, they kind of experience people saying, no, you're going to have to take care of Melody if you get married to her because she has a disability. And so, there is that pushback from socially from other people who didn't think that Melody was capable of being in a marriage. And obviously she's proven that wrong because as she said that, they support each other. He's not her main support. She supports him too. And, that's just, I think, another example how oftentimes our misconceptions can kind of cloud our judgment of what people want and what they need.
Yeah.
So now we want to talk a little bit about how you as individuals who support folks with disabilities, maybe their parents, how you can kind of help them and their families navigate through some of these maybe tougher topics to talk about. And so I think recognizing a person's desires and helping them move towards their vision for what they want, a vision for a good life, and hope, a lot of times that's going to include marriage, family, and intimate relationships. But, again, we don't want to just jump in, blindly. And, that's often what parents and caregivers are most afraid of, well, they're not ready for that yet. Well, a lot of people aren't ready. A lot of people aren't ready for marriage without disabilities when they first get married or when they first start dating. But, help us identify or help people identify the skills that they need to reach their goals. Help, and for example, some of those might be help them build appropriate social skills. How many times is too many times to call someone, before it's going to get really annoying and they're not going to want to answer the phone anymore. That's not a great tactic for flirting. It's calling someone 25 times a day. How to accept a breakup when things don't turn out well.
Mm-hmm.
How to identify and respect people's boundaries. What does it mean? What does consent mean? What does it mean when someone says no or that they're not comfortable with something? Help build those small skills so that then they're ready for those bigger decisions. Again, recognize the difference between public and private behavior. What's something that's okay to do when we're alone versus what's something that's not okay to do when we're in public places. Those tiny steps will help us kind of get there. It's not going to be overnight, and that's okay. But realizing that it takes a long time isn't a good excuse for just not doing it. Help people work towards those goals. Again, start with the small steps. How to introduce ourselves and talk to the people we're interested in. How to monitor your own reproductive health before you become sexually active. Going to the doctor, getting your yearly annual checkup, making sure that everything's okay, getting any tests that need done. And then identify resources and supports that can help individual and their family navigate these decisions. So there's so many of them out there. But the one particular one that, again, we're using is from Elevatus Training. And there's several resources. There's a full curriculum that's made to actually be taught to individuals with disabilities. But there's also a curriculum for families and talk to their adult children or children with disabilities about everything. I mean, it's not just sexuality, it is relationships, marriage, parenting, decision making, so many different things. And so that's just, I think if families can feel that they have information and are supported, I think the idea of these things become less scary. I think, again, what Mel said, a lot of it was just a lack of knowledge or understanding from her family members and how to support her in the best way to engage in those things. And instead of letting her do it, it was, let's protect her from these things so that doesn't happen. But instead, giving people information, giving families information is going to put them more at ease. And so I just wanted to put into, this life trajectory worksheet, I think can be really helpful for kind of planning this out. Because when you ask people what their vision for a good life is, a lot of times it's going to include those things, those marriage and relationships and children. And so utilizing this tool with families to kind of chart out those small steps that will get them to those big things. And you can do a vision specifically for this realm, just a vision just for relationships and marriage and children, and not include everything else in their life, just focus on this area, and kind of chart out if that is someone's goal, help them chart out the little steps that they need to get to achieve those. And then Melody, do you want to talk a little bit about just kind of talking to parents or caregivers?
Talking to parents, I don't know how easy it would be to tell a parent that your child is wanting to get, be in a relationship, but being able to understand what is it like. Like I said, I wish that somebody would start on and talk to me. But saying that there are feelings and
Their feelings are normal.
yeah, their feelings are normal. All parents have a desire to protect their children, whether they have a disability or not. Good intentions.
They have, parents, they're not, more than likely, most times, they're not trying to, keep someone from living a full life, but they're scared. And there's not a parent out there that is not afraid of the decisions that their children will make, even whether it's the person with a disability or not. One of our presentations, there's not a parent of an 18-year-old out there that isn't worried about the decisions that they're going to make as they're transitioning from like high school to adulthood. Not a parent in the world. And that's a parent's job, is to worry and protect. And so the intentions are good. But we have to understand that, sometimes, you know, even if they have a disability, there's that need, just as with every other child, to kind of let go and to let people try and experience new things.
Yeah.
And so helping to them, how do you navigate this with your other children if they have other children? What are how are you talking to your other children about this? And it should be similar. And then helping them realize that people with disabilities have the same physical and hormonal makeup of any other human. So again, what we said, just because they might have cognitive disabilities doesn't mean they're not in a body of a 30-year-old or of a 15-year-old, and their bodies are changing and developing just like everyone else's. And again, being ignorant of that or refusing to acknowledge that isn't going to protect them. And again, just explaining to parents that it's better to be proactive than reactive. We can restrict and we can keep people isolated, or we can give them all the tools and supports and build them supports around them, so that when there is a question, we can go to someone to talk to, or they can go to someone to talk to about it. They can identify the supports that are there to help them. It's better to provide people information so that they can identify threats, abuse, or exploitation. If we don't, we hear awful stories all the time of, someone was being repeatedly abused, but because they didn't know the terminology for their body parts, they couldn't tell anybody what was happening, or they could not communicate that effectively. So we have to give them that information. Keeping that from them isn't doing any help. Show us and teach us how to help, or teach people how to healthily and safely express their desires in a way that is going to be in a safe and protected environment. And then so we can make decisions when it's really important. Again, the consistency of being able to make day-to-day decisions is so important to making really big decisions.
Talk and listen to what we want. Give us information so we can make informed choices. Allow us to ask questions. Remember, I am a human being who wants to live a full and normal life. This includes relationship, individuality, marriage, and family. Encourage self-advocates in all appears of life. Let me participate daily, day to day, making decisions. Respect my decisions, even if you don't agree. Let me make mistakes and learn from the consequences.
So, and I will say that this goes into our next slide, but this, a lot of the pushback you might get is that, well, we have a guardianship. The thing is that these supports and these things can be utilized within a guardianship. A good guardian, a good quality guardian should still be asking people what they want and working with them to achieve that. It should not be, while they may retain that final right to make important legal decisions, a guardians should be helping support people to live the life that they want. And so these same tools can be utilized within guardianship. And so again, we're going to talk a little bit about supported decision making and how supported decision making, whether it's actually a standalone supported decision making agreement, or if it is utilized even within guardianship or outside of guardianship. Really, supported decision making is really how we all make decisions. We all ask people advice. We all have certain people we go to. When I bought a car, I went to my brother, who's knowledgeable about cars and actually is a car salesman. We all make decisions with support. And so whether or not you're making this formal or putting it in an agreement, you stressing with families to utilize this supported decision making, where you identify the right people who can support an individual with a disability, when we have decisions to make about sexuality, relationship, and marriage, it's all about putting in that infrastructure around a person that will safeguard them, and understand that, you know, especially when it comes to sexuality, relationships, and marriage, that person that we might want to go to, or you might want to go to, isn't necessarily going to be a parent. I'm sure most of us, when we were, first learning about, or, started dating someone, our parents are probably not the first person that we go and talk to. You talk with your friends about that. You talk to your friends about dating, and, so understand that sometimes the parent might need to take a back seat, but identify someone that is a trusted person that they can go to, so there is someone there. And it could be, it could be different people, but, help us identify those people. And you can utilize a formal supported decision-making agreement to do it, where you list out the people that will specifically help in certain areas, but it can just be something that's also informal too, just recognizing that there are people that I'm going to go to if I have questions about something important, or that if I have a big decision to make, and I'm going to get their advice. And again, stressing that be proactive. Don't wait until mistakes happen to start supporting someone. Put that infrastructure around them. Because as Mel said, if she had that, I think she would have maybe been able to advocate more for what she wanted. If she had more of a support system that understood what she wanted and what she needed, that she could have maybe made some different decisions. Looking back in her life, she kind of maybe regrets that she didn't get to have children. And she might have advocated for that differently if she had more of a support system that understood. So again, using the life course material, the support star, I think this is a super helpful tool. We actually use it a lot for just like our self-advocacy chapter planning and things like that. But we, the support star, you can specifically focus on one particular thing. So in this one, I put marriage, relationships, and sexuality. So when we're talking to a person, maybe we're focusing on that. But helping identify the supports that are available to a person in their community, in all of these different facets of their life. So just some examples. So when we're talking about relationship based, maybe it's identifying their friends that they want to talk to about these things, or family. Maybe it's a doctor or therapist that they want to process these things with. Community based, we're talking about maybe a community clinic or Planned Parenthood parenting classes, sexuality education classes, premarital counseling, single groups for people who want to just learn to want to meet other people, as a step towards that goal of wanting to be married. Personal strengths, what are the things that individuals know and understand, and the skills that they have, building self-advocacy skills so people can stand up and say, nope, I don't want this, or yes, I do want this. Having sexual health knowledge, knowing how to prevent the spread of STDs or prevent pregnancy, if that's what they choose to do. Even things like, technology can support us. It might not be a human, but it's still, there's a lot of technology that can support us. Maybe it's a phone reminder for someone to take their birth control, to help them remember, or to an app that helps them chart their cycle so that they know when their highest chance of getting pregnant is, or dating, maybe it's dating apps, helping people navigate that safely. There's lots of other information. One of my coworkers suggested, who's a parent of a child with a disability, that YouTube has actually a lot of really informational or stories of people sharing, them navigating through, like the video of Ricardo at the beginning, where they're, seeing stories of other people who are doing these things. And then when we talk about eligibility specific services, maybe someone wants to get married, but they're worried about how that marriage is going to affect their benefits, making sure that they have a Ben analysis done so that they can figure out what that new income or double income how it's gonna affect things. Maybe they do have a child and they need reduced child care vouchers. Maybe it's just the simple act of having your CHIO staff or your behavior management staff help you strengthen social skills when you go out, on outings and things like that. But I think if we can help parents understand that there's so many supports available and the different supports, I think it helps ease that idea and fear that they're just kind of going out there and winging it. If we can make sure that we identify those supports.
I think when she talk about supports, even though now when I look at the support, there's a lot of support now in the 2000s. In the 1980s and 90s, because there was no supports. But when you look at it nowadays, a whole lot more support for people with disabilities. Mm-hmm.
And so that brings us to the end. I know, again, you guys are going to ask questions and we'll hopefully get back to you. But Mel, is there anything else that you want to add about how they, as case managers, can help families and individuals navigate through all of this?
Just to listen to them whenever if they come to you with a question, anything pertaining their body and sex and having a relationship, listen to them. Don't just say, "Oh, you can't raise that baby," or that baby, DSI gonna come in and take that. Don't listen to that, because that's not in the mind with a person with a disability. They don't want to hear that. They don't want to feel that. I think that's one of the worst things that a person could hear or feel. It says it's just coming from a loved one or someone that you trust. Talk to them. Listen to them. They may have to be 2 or 3 of you to sit down and talk to them, but listen. That's my thing.
And so just you can contact us if you need anything. This is the contact information on this page. But again, we will be happy to answer questions and get back with you about some of those questions that you might have. But we really appreciate you taking the time to listen to us today, and hopefully you found it helpful. Just from our experience, with working with self-advocates of Indiana and Melody helping educate a lot of self-advocates across the state, I think this is a really big issue that needs to be, that people need to be supported, because, people want to be, have fulfilling lives that include relationships and family, and, we want to help people achieve that. So Thank you for listening.
Thank you, everyone, for attending today's call. Again, your questions will be collected and shared with Melody and Amanda, and the responses will be sent out to all of the attendees.